In this section, we're going to start putting together our config for the issuer object. This is going to be another configuration file, very much like all the others we have previously put together. So inside of my code editor, I'll find my K8s directory, and inside there, I'm going to make a new file called issuer.yaml. Again, the purpose of the issuer file is to describe to our cert manager exactly where it should go in attempt to get a certificate. Now, just like many other config files we put together, we're going to have an API version. We're going to specify an API version here, very dissimilar to any other that we've put together so far. We'll say certmanager.k8s.io/v1 alpha 1. Now, the reason for this very different API version right here, remember that the API version is essentially specifying a bucket of different object types that we can pull from. We've said that we're going to make an object of type issuer, and that is definitely not an object that is included in Kubernetes by default. It is something that is defined specifically by the cert manager that we just installed. So for the API version, we're saying reach into the cert manager bucket of objects. We want to be able to create a issuer type object. So on the next line, we'll define our kind of object, which is going to be a cluster issuer. We'll then put down our metadata tag and give this a name. We're going to name it after the source for the issuer. So the purpose of this issuer is to tell our cert manager to reach out to Let's Encrypt, and specifically the production version of Let's Encrypt. So we're going to give this a name of Let's Encrypt-prod, like so. After that, we'll put down a spec. This is going to have an entry of Acme. We'll then specify the server that cert manager should reach out to when it tries to establish this verification process. So this is essentially a link to the Let's Encrypt API that's going to be used for setting up all this different communication back and forth. So this is going to be a hard-coded URL right here. We're going to do HTTPS, notice the S on there, acme-vo2.api.let'sencrypt.org/directory, like so. Now after that, we're going to put in our personal email address. Now the email is not actually used as part of this verification or anything like that. Let's Encrypt says that they have to have your email on hand just for whatever purposes they decide. So we're not going to actually get any emails or anything like that or have to respond to anything. Nonetheless, I still do recommend that you put in your real email address. So for my email, inside of a string, I'll put my email, like so. Next up, we're going to define something called a private key secret ref. And we'll give it a value of name Let's Encrypt prod. All right, so the private key secret ref right here is not at all connected to the secret that is generated as a part of the certificate. It turns out that behind the scenes, when your Kubernetes cluster is going to eventually communicate with Let's Encrypt, during this process, at some stage, Let's Encrypt sends over a little secret key that is tied to essentially your record with Let's Encrypt. And it actually comes into play as a part of this verification process right here. It's actually used to essentially decide exactly how to respond when Let's Encrypt tries to access this randomly generated URL. It's this little key that gets sent back to us and stored inside of the secret key ref is not actually something we ever have to use. So essentially we just kind of throw it on here and forget about it. Now the last option we'll put on is HTTP 01, and we're going to put a set of curly braces like so. Now this probably looks like a real weird option right here. So all this option is doing is saying we want to use this HTTP process of obtaining a certificate. We want to reach out to Let's Encrypt and say, hey, I want a certificate. Let's Encrypt says, okay, respond on this route, and then we eventually do. That's all this little configuration line right here is doing. There's actually another different way of obtaining a certificate or going through this verification process that is a little bit different than the HTTP one that we're putting together right now. But without a doubt, setting up the HTTP version is a lot easier than the other DNS option that is available. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's all we have to put together inside of our issuer.yaml file. So I'm going to save this file, and then I'll close it out. We're going to take a little pause, And then in the next section, we're going to start putting together our config file for our certificate as well. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.